Hello, it's Paula. Welcome to another episode of Women in Astronomy. In today's episode, we'll be talking about three mathematicians who were vital to the mission that sent the first American into orbit. These three African American mathematicians helped the USA win the space race while overcoming sexism and racism. You might have seen them portrayed in the movie Hidden Figures, which tells the story of how these mathematicians contributed to the success of the US space program. The movie is based off the book of the same name, Hidden Figures, which is by Margot Lee Shetterly. Before there was NASA, there was NACA, or the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. During World War II, many men joined the war effort, so many U.S. organizations started hiring women and women of color during the 1940s. In 1935, the Langley Research Center at NACA had 5 female computers, and 10 years later, there were about 400. During this time, NACA was segregated, which means that there were separate facilities for black and white workers. From 1943 to 1958, the West computers at the Langley Research Center were the African American women mathematicians who worked as human computers doing computations and calculations for the space missions. The white women mathematicians worked in the East section. Women were usually limited to having the jobs as computers, while men were able to work as engineers. Even the President Roosevelt had issued executive orders to end racial segregation and discrimination in jobs. During this time, there were also Jim Crow laws, which were state and local laws that enforced segregation and that made it more difficult for African American women to be hired than white women. In 1958, NACA transitioned to what is today known as NASA, and these segregated facilities were abolished. In this episode, we'll be talking about 3 of the women who worked as West area computers. This is Dorothy Vaughan. Dorothy Vaughan was a mathematician and programmer for 28 years at the Langley Research Center at NACA. She was assigned to the West Area Computing Unit in 1943. In 1949, Vaughan was assigned to be the head of the West Area Computers, becoming the first black supervisor at NACA and one of the few female supervisors. She acted in this role for a few years before officially becoming promoted to head of personnel. She led the team of all black women mathematicians to make crucial calculations for missions. Vaughan predicted that machine computers would be the next important thing, so she taught her team Fortran, which is a computer programming language that's known for doing complicated numerical computations, and other programming skills in preparation for the advancement of technology. In 1961, Vaughan started working in electronic computing in the new Analysis and Computation Division after the West Computing Office closed. This new division was desegregated, so people of different races and genders worked together. In a 1994 interview, Vaughan looked back at her time at Langley. When she was asked about how it was to be an African American woman at this time, she said that she changed what she could and what she couldn't, she endured. But she fondly looks back at her time there, saying that working at NACA during the time of the space race felt like she was on the cutting edge of something very exciting. Katherine HarrisJohnson was a physicist and mathematician. From a young age, she loved math and had a passion for learning. After graduating college, she became a teacher. Later, she learned that NACA was hiring African American women to be computers, or people who did math problems. The first time she applied, the jobs had already filled up, so she applied the next year and got the job. She worked as a West Area computer from 1953 to 1958, until one day she was temporarily placed at an all-white flight research team. She quickly demonstrated her skills and started working there permanently. She wanted to learn more and frequently asked questions. She started attending meetings that only men had been allowed to attend previously by telling people that she'd done the work and therefore she belonged there. She left her job as a computer to solve problems for NASA. Johnson said that women in these days had to be assertive and aggressive, and the degree to which you had to be that way depended on where you were. At NASA, women were not allowed to have their names on reports. Johnson put her name on a report that she'd done most of the work on, and hers was the first to name a woman as a contributor. She worked on Project Mercury, which was a mission to send the first person to fly into space, and on the Apollo 11 mission to send the first person to the moon. Her work included a lot of math to calculate trajectories, launch windows, and return paths for space flights. Her work was crucial because a small error could lead to a catastrophic outcome, and she also plotted backup navigation charts in the case that something went wrong mid-flight. During John Glenn's orbit of Earth, NASA used electronic computers to calculate the orbit. John Glenn asked for Johnson to verify the computer's calculations and refused to fly until Johnson made the calculations. She went on to work with digital computers at NASA. She worked on the Apollo 13 mission to the moon, and her backup plans were used when the mission was aborted. This enabled the safe return of the astronauts. Johnson famously said that everybody was concerned with getting astronauts to the moon, but she was concerned with getting them back. Johnson continued at NASA, working for the Space Shuttle program, and continued to encourage students to enter STEM fields. This is Mary Jackson. Mary Jackson was a mathematician also, and she was an aerospace engineer. She started as a computer at the Langley Research Center under Dorothy Vaughan, just like Katherine Johnson. She started working in the supersonic pressure tunnel in 1953, where she studied how forces affect models in order to better understand airflow, thrust, and drag. The tunnel generated winds that were almost 2 times faster than the speed of sound. Her mentor was engineer Kazimierz Zarnecki. He encouraged Jackson to take some classes so that she could be promoted to an engineer. She had to take classes at a night program offered by the University of Virginia at a local all-white high school. She petitioned to be allowed to take these classes, and after taking these classes in 1958, she became NASA's first black female engineer. She was a longtime supporter of hiring and promoting women in science, engineering, and math at NASA. Eventually, Jackson achieved that most senior title within the engineering department, and she decided to switch gears to serve as an administrator in the Equal Opportunity Specialist field. In this position, she advised women and people from underrepresented backgrounds and worked to highlight, hire, and promote more people from diverse backgrounds at NASA. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Women in Astronomy. The women who worked at NACA and later at NASA were vital to some of the most famous space missions. They often faced discrimination and hardship, but their passion for their work was clear and their contributions are undeniable. If you'd like to learn more about these women, I encourage you to read the book Hidden Figures by Margot Lee Shetterly or to watch the movie Hidden Figures. Thanks again. I'll see you in the next episode of Women in Astronomy.